My cousin's name was Theon. At least, that's what my aunt whispered to me once, when no one was listening. Theon had a weak lung. When the elders poured wine over him, he coughed. A single, frail infant cough. That was his crime. His sentence was the apothete, the place of rejection. They left him on the rocks of Mount Taygetus. To the wind, the wolves, and the indifferent stars. I was 5. I didn't understand. I only knew he was gone. 2 years later, they came for me. They didn't ask for my name. They took it. For the next 13 years, I was boy. I was a number. I was raw material. This is the truth they don't carve into stone. Sparta wasn't built by heroes. It was built by a machine that consumed boys and produced monsters. This is the story of that machine. This is the story of the Agoge. What you just heard wasn't a scene from a movie. It was the opening act of one of history's most chilling social experiments. For centuries we've bought the myth. The 300, the noble last stand, discipline, courage, sacrifice. But I'm here to tell you that myth is a carefully crafted lie, a smokescreen for something far darker, far more calculated. The Spartan Agoge wasn't a school. It was a factory, an assembly line for the human soul. Its product, not warriors, not citizens, but hollow vessels of pure obedience, psychopaths with perfect posture. Tonight on The Black Code, we don't just explore history, we crack it open, we expose its rotten, beating heart. We will follow the 13-year journey from boy to weapon. We will see how a society decided that to be strong, you must first be broken, that to be loyal, you must first be empty. If you're ready to have everything you thought you knew about Sparta shattered, to see the monster behind the bronze mask, then you are in the right place. This is the Black Code. The truth is waiting. To understand the factory, you must first understand the fear that powered it. Sparta was not like Athens or Corinth. It was a dystopia forged in paranoia. A tiny masterclass, the Spartiates, perhaps 10,000 at their peak, ruling over a vast, seething population of enslaved helots, numbering in the hundreds of thousands. Imagine a gated community where the guards are outnumbered 20-1 by the gardeners, cooks, and servants. And everyone knows it. The masters live in a state of perpetual, low-grade terror. The fear of rebellion was a tangible thing. It smelled like sweat and smoke. It tasted like metal on the tongue. This fear dictated every single law, every ritual, every breath. So they institutionalized it. Every autumn, the Spartan ephors, the ruling council, would formally declare war on the helot population. This wasn't a metaphor. It was a legal fiction that licensed state-sanctioned murder. It was called the Crypteia, and we will return to it. But this context is crucial. The Agoge was not designed in a vacuum of philosophical ideals about manhood. It was designed in a panic room. Its sole purpose was to manufacture the perfect prison guard. A guard who would not hesitate to kill the prisoners if they stirred. A guard who felt no kinship, no pity, no shared humanity. This is the rotten seed from which the entire twisted tree of the Agoge grew. The process of manufacturing this guard began at the very moment of life. The first quality control checkpoint was birth. Newborn boys were brought before the Gerousia, the Council of Elders. They were not blessed, they were inspected. They were bathed in undiluted wine, a brutal test of constitution. A weak cry, a convulsion, meant failure. They were also examined for any physical flaw. A clubfoot, a perceived weakness in the limbs, even a birthmark deemed inauspicious. Failure was not tolerated. The infant was taken to the apothete, the chasm on Mount Taygetus. He was left exposed to the elements, to die of thirst, of exposure, or to be taken by animals. This was not a hidden crime of passion. It was a public, ritualized act of state policy. The message to Spartan parents was crystal clear, and it was brutal. Your child is not a person. He is a resource of the state, like a flawed sword blank. He is melted down before he can weaken the arsenal. Your love is irrelevant. Your grief is a private treason. The state has spoken. If a boy passed this first culling, he entered a 7-year twilight, a strange limbo between family and the machine. His father was largely absent, living in the Syssitia, the all-male military dining clubs. His mother became his first and most important drill instructor. Her love was expressed through harshness. She taught him to endure hunger without complaint, to bear minor pains in silence. She withheld affection to toughen him. She was, in effect, pre-breaking him for the state, preparing his psyche for the total emotional withdrawal that was to come. Her embrace was a farewell to warmth. Then, at age 7, the transition was complete. The paidon nomos, the state warden, arrived. There were no tears allowed, no long goodbyes. Boys were simply taken, gathered in the night. Their personal names were officially discarded. They were no longer Lysander or Leon or Brygos. They were now boy of the wolf bua or the boar bua. A bua was a herd, a pack. The first and most fundamental lesson was immediate. You are not an individual. You are a unit. Your identity is the pack. This was stage 1, the systematic dismantling of self. And its primary tool was not a whip, but an absence, hunger. The boys were fed a notorious diet centered on melas zomos, black broth, a vile gruel of pork, blood, vinegar, and salt. It was protein-rich but deliberately disgusting and, most importantly, insufficient. They were kept in a state of constant, gnawing hunger. Starvation is a profound psychological weapon. It erodes social niceties. It reduces morality to a luxury. It makes cunning and theft not just acceptable but necessary for survival. And here, the state laid its first great trap. The boys were ordered to steal food to supplement their rations, to steal from storehouses, from the mess halls, even from the helots. But if they were caught in the act, the punishment was brutal and public, not for the crime of theft, but for the crime of failure, for being incompetent, clumsy, stupid, for getting caught. They were flogged. The goal was explicit, to teach the boy to dissociate his mind from the screaming of his body, to build an impassable wall between searing, animal pain, and any outward reaction, to master the self by annihilating its connection to the flesh. This brings us to the most infamous lesson of all, the story of the fox. A boy tasked with stealing captures a live fox. He hides it under his cloak. The animal, terrified, panics. It claws, it bites. It begins to gnaw its way through the boy's stomach to escape. The pain must have been unimaginable. Agony beyond. Yet, as the story goes, the boy stood perfectly still. He made no sound. He did not cry out, did not reveal his theft, even as the fox tore open his abdomen. He stood, and he died in silence. In any other context, this is a horrifying, senseless tragedy. In the Agoge, it was held up as the highest ideal. The ultimate graduation, the perfect score. The state had won. The individual will had been utterly, completely eradicated. The self was so annihilated that not even the primal instinct to cry out in agony remained. Stage 2. The replacement of family. Having burned the bridge to the natal family, the Agoge needed to provide a new anchor. It could not leave an emotional vacuum. Nature abhors a vacuum, so it filled it with a controlled, state-mandated bond. This was the institution of pederasty, not as a hidden subculture, but as a formal, integral part of the curriculum. Every adolescent boy was paired with a young man in his late teens or early 20s, an iron. This older youth was his erastes, his lover, his mentor, his commander. The boy was the eromenos, the beloved. The relationship had a sexual component, but its purpose was far more psychological than physical. It created a bond of intense loyalty and profound shame that deliberately bypassed the father-son relationship. The boy's performance in the Agoge reflected directly on his erastes. If the boy showed cowardice, failed a task, or was weak, both were disgraced. The intimacy of the bond turned it into a chain of total, inescapable accountability. It taught a devastating lesson. Love is not unconditional. It is a reward for performance. It is a transaction of obedience for approval. And it can be withdrawn with catastrophic social consequences at any moment. It was loyalty weaponized. Simultaneously, the environment itself was a weapon. Comfort was the enemy, the province of the weak. Boys slept in communal barracks on beds of reeds they had to gather themselves from the Eurotas River. In winter, they were permitted to add thistle heads to the bedding, a cruel joke of insulation. They owned one cloak, one threadbare woolen himation, worn in the scorching summer and the freezing winter alike. They wore no shoes, ever. Their feet bled, cracked, calloused, and transformed into leathery pads. This was not poverty, it was pedagogy. The body had to be taught to despise warmth, softness, and ease. It had to learn that comfort was a moral failing, a sign of the helot, the slave, the future victim. The mind had to associate deprivation with strength and comfort with corruption. Stage 3. The cult of the pack. With the self dismantled and a new loyalty forged, the pack became the only universe. And the glue of the pack was ritualized, sanctioned violence. Not against an external enemy, but against each other. Organized brawls between the different buai at the Platanistas, the Plane Tree Grove, were major events. There were no rules, no referees, eye gouging, biting, breaking fingers. All was permitted, even encouraged. Elders and citizens would gather to watch, not to stop the violence, but to judge it, to see who displayed the most carteria. Not skill, not technique. Carteria. Endurance, toughness, the capacity to give and receive brutal punishment without quitting. The lesson was savage. Extinguish the instinct to help the fallen. If your pack brother was being beaten unconscious, you did not intervene, you watched. His failure was his alone, it was contamination, and you avoided it. They were being turned into wolves, and wolves cull the weak from their own pack. This was the socialization of sociopathy. It bred a loyalty that was cold and pragmatic based on pack survival, not on compassion for the individual. Even communication was stripped down and weaponized. They were trained to be laconic. The very word laconic comes from Laconia, the Spartan region. Speech was for commands, insults, and warfare, not for poetry, debate, or expression of feeling. When Philip of Macedon threatened, "If I enter Laconia, I will raze your city," the Spartan reply was a single word, if. Language was a dagger to be used sparingly and with lethal precision. Its power to connect, to empathize, to reveal vulnerability was systematically removed. Silence was strength. Words were a calculated risk. By age 18, a boy was hardened, cold, and loyal to his pack, but the machine had one final definitive test, a test to ensure that any last buried seed of empathy, any flicker of conscience, was not just dormant, but dead. This was the krypteia, often translated as secret service or secret police, but that is a sanitization. The Krypteia was a state-sanctioned death squad composed of the most promising Agoge graduates. These youths, often around 18, were sent out alone, armed with nothing but a dagger. Their mission: to infiltrate the Helot territories, to hide by day and by night, to murder. Not enemy soldiers, not in battle. They were to assassinate the strongest, most capable, most respected Helots. The natural leaders, the men of spirit, the ones who might one day say enough and spark a rebellion. This was preemptive terror distilled to its purest, most psychological form. Imagine the scene. A Spartan youth crouched in a ditch, smelling the turned earth, watching a Helot farmer finish his day's work. The man is singing. He's tending his own plot of land, the fruit of his labor going to a Spartan master. He has a wife, children. He poses no direct, immediate threat. He is simply capable. He is simply strong. As night falls, the youth must move. He must slit that man's throat or stab him in the back as he walks home. This is not an act of passion, of rage, or of war. It is an act of cold, calculated, ritual duty. The Krypteia was the final brutal suture in the psychological surgery the Agoge had performed. It surgically welded loyalty to the state with the act of killing the innocent. It declared, in Blood and Darkness, empathy is treason. Conscience is a flaw. Your duty is to exterminate the best of those we oppress, lest they one day oppose us. If you could do this, you graduated. You were a full Spartiate, a weapon fully forged, tempered, and blooded. A perfect guard for the prison state. The machine had completed its work. But what of failure? What if a boy at any point in this 13-year ordeal cracked? If he wept for his mother in the night? If he flinched from delivering a killing blow in the Platanistas? If he showed a flicker of kindness to a Helot or failed to complete his task in the Krypteia? Here, the Spartan system displayed a chilling psychological genius. They did not execute the failure. A dead boy could become a martyr. A story, a secret rallying point for doubt. They did not exile him. An exile could talk, could tell the world about the fox, the hunger, the sanctioned murder. No, they invented a punishment far more insidious, far more effective for a society built on honor. They created the Trisantes, the tremblers, the social living dead. A trembler was forced to wear a patchwork cloak of disgrace, a harlequin's costume of shame. He was required to shave only one side of his beard, making him a walking grotesque, a half-man. No Spartan woman would ever marry him. No citizen would speak to him except to utter insults. He was given the most vile, degrading tasks. He was a ghost in broad daylight. In a society where public honor and respect were the only currencies that mattered, this was a fate worse than death. It was a perpetual, visible, breathing hell, and it served one crucial purpose for the Agoge. It was the ultimate motivational tool. Every boy in the herd, every youth in the pack, saw the trembler. He was the walking embodiment of their deepest fear. The constant, silent scream, obey, excel, become hollow. Or this will be you. You will be a non-person, a ghost, a warning to others. So, what was the final product of this 13-year assembly line? Let's look at him. A full Spartiate, age 20. He stands in the phalanx, the shields lock, the spears lower. He feels no fear. Not because he is brave in the way we understand, but because the part of his psyche that registers personal fear for his own safety has been systematically scorched away. He feels no pity for the men he is about to kill, because his capacity for empathetic connection has been surgically removed. He feels no individual ambition. His identity is the line of shields. His purpose is the command of his officer. He is, in the most literal sense, a masterpiece of hollow engineering, a human weapon. But what was the cost to Sparta itself? Look at the cultural landscape, or rather the lack of it. While Athens was giving the world philosophy, drama, history, and sublime art, Sparta produced nothing. No great poets, no playwrights, no sculptors, no thinkers who questioned the nature of the cosmos or justice. Sparta's greatest artistic achievement was the phalanx itself, a moving sculpture of bronze and death, manned by empty men. It was a society that was all engine and no soul, a cultural desert meticulously irrigated with fear and obedience. And like all systems built solely on repression and terror, it contained the seeds of its own destruction. The system was demographic suicide, the constant warfare, the brutal training that killed or crippled so many, the emotional sterility that made family life a joyless duty of state. The population of pure Spartiates plummeted. From a peak of maybe 10,000 to a mere handful by the time Rome rose. They were an elite so refined, so specialized. They became an endangered species. They forgot how to be anything but a weapon. And when a weapon meets a new kind of opponent, a new strategy, it can only break. It cannot adapt. At the Battle of Leuctra in 371 BC, Thebes did just that. They deepened one flank, creating an overwhelming hammer to crush the Spartan elite. The Spartans, trained only for the rigid, unthinking obedience of the phalanx, had no answer. Their king was killed. Their elite was slaughtered. The myth of invincibility shattered in an afternoon. And with no other identity to fall back on, Sparta faded into irrelevance, a ghost haunting its own terrifying legend. So why does the Agoge matter to us here now? Because it is not ancient history, it is a blueprint, a case study in the totalitarian toolkit. It is a masterclass in how to dismantle a human being and rebuild them as a tool of the state. We see its echoes not in gyms or boot camps, but in the Hitler Youth, taught to betray their parents to the state. In the Khmer Rouge's killing fields, where old people were murdered to create a blank slate society. In the grooming of child soldiers, where kindness is punished, violence is rewarded, and a new, brutal family is forged. In any ideology, any cult, any system that whispers the same seductive, poisonous lie, your identity is a sickness. Your family is a threat. Your feelings are treason. Surrender them to the collective, become part of the machine. Or be cast out, shamed, destroyed. The boy with the fox is not a hero. He is the ultimate victim. His story has just been recast for 2,500 years as the ultimate ideal. His silent agony is the most effective commercial the machine ever produced. So the next time you hear Spartan used to mean disciplined, tough, or austere, I want you to remember three things. Remember the apothete, the chasm that swallowed infants for the crime of a weak cough. Remember the trembler, the living ghost in the patchwork cloak, the eternal warning. And remember the helot farmer, singing in his field at dusk, moments before a Spartan boy, trained for 13 years, slit his throat to prove his loyalty to a state built on fear. That is the true, unvarnished, horrific cost of the Spartan ideal. True strength is not the absence of fear or empathy. That is not strength, that is damage, that is a void. True strength is the courage to feel, to connect, to pity, and to choose compassion, even when it is hard, to remain human. What Sparta built was not a society of strong men. It was a society of magnificent, terrifying emptiness. A A civilization so pathologically afraid of the other, it became terrified of the humanity within its own children. It traded souls for security, and in the end, it lost both. The machine consumed itself. If these journeys into the darkest code of human history compel you, if you believe that understanding these blueprints is our best defense against them ever being used again, then you are in the right place. This is the Black Code. We decipher the programs that run human suffering. Subscribe. Hit the notification bell, because the past is not just a story, it is a warning. Let us know in the comments, what aspect of the Agoge's psychological blueprint chilled you to the bone? Was it the weaponization of hunger, the creation of the Trembler, the final bloody exam of the Cryptia? Until next time, remember this: the most dangerous ghosts are not the ones that haunt houses. They are the ones that haunt ideas. The ghost of Sparta still walks among us, whispering its old seductive lie. That to be hard, you must first be hollow.